When girls came into the picture, I couldn't even make eye contact with the ones I liked. I remained a virgin while I saw others having boyfriends and girlfriends, which made me feel like the biggest loser ever. I felt inferior to anyone who had sex or a relationship. Now, at some point, I had intense social anxiety in most social situations. I blushed at the drop of a hat, and I was absolutely obsessed about what others thought of me. I woke up with anxiety, dreading who I'd have to face that day, and at night I'd be embarrassed and upset about the shitty social events that I had been in, pissed off at myself, while at the same time being scared of the next day. I was super worried about my reputation, and social anxiety completely controlled my life. And I know I'm not the only one who felt this way. Can you relate? Hey, it's Seb. I'm a former social anxiety disorder sufferer, a social confidence coach, and a host of the popular podcast show, Social Anxiety Solutions. I'm going to start with my recovery story, and afterwards I'll break down the psychology of how you can become completely social anxiety free. My social anxiety started after a painful childhood. My dad was my best friend, and I was a real daddy's boy, but he suddenly died when I was 5. And I really struggled to accept that he was not going to come back anymore. I became very difficult to deal with, which led to constant fights with my mom and later my stepdad, whom I hated. By the time I was 9, the situation got so bad that I had to be placed outside the house. A big rejection, of course. My uncle took me in and I changed schools. I was popular here at my new school and often joined a group of kids who teased a boy with big ears named Bus. Then one day my teacher, whom I was very close to, likely decided to teach me a lesson. We were going to watch a documentary on TV and I was sitting in front of the class, right in front of the TV. And my teacher yelled from the back of the class, "Sebastian, move with your big Dumbo ears away from the television. Nobody can see a thing." Now she probably meant it as a joke, but it was a shock to me. I felt betrayed and rejected and I blushed. Now my face turned bright red, something I had never experienced before, and everyone in my class laughed at me. And I felt so humiliated I didn't know where to look or what to do with myself. After that day, the blushing happened more and more often. Whenever I was the center of attention, whenever I got criticized, whenever I was teased for having Dumbo ears, and so on. Since this was so humiliating and I couldn't control it, I became afraid of blushing. And I also started to feel anxious in situations where I could become the center of attention. My heart would race, I'd get a lump in my throat, and sometimes couldn't properly get the words out. I'd get super serious, awkward, and feel the heat rise to my face, and I wouldn't know how to handle myself. Now this led to more embarrassing and awkward social situations, and the social anxiety and the blushing progressively got worse. I began to dread most social events, and days, sometimes weeks in advance, I'd sit at home worrying about all these worst case scenarios that could happen, like how I'd blush in front of everyone and how I'd get challenged and would freeze, unable to respond. I started avoiding risky social events or quickly got drunk or high in them. Because when I was sober, it felt like everyone was constantly watching and judging me. I of course acted like I was fine, but I was terribly insecure. I felt this craving for people to like me and think of me as cool, but deep down I didn't really think that I deserved that. I was convinced everyone saw my weakness, how much of a tryhard I was, and I imagined how they were talking about me and laughing behind my back. When girls came into the picture, I couldn't even make eye contact with the ones I liked. I remained a virgin while I saw others having boyfriends and girlfriends, which made me feel like the biggest loser ever. I felt inferior to anyone who had sex or a relationship. Now, at some point, I had intense social anxiety in most social situations. I blushed at the drop of a hat, and I was absolutely obsessed about what others thought of me. I woke up with anxiety, dreading who I'd have to face that day, and at night I'd be embarrassed and upset about the shitty social events that I had been in, pissed off at myself, while at the same time being scared of the next day. I was super worried about my reputation, and social anxiety completely controlled my life. And I know I'm not the only one who felt this way. Can you relate? I discovered self-help and I tried it all. Journaling, affirmations, challenging thoughts, hypnosis, NLP, timeline therapy, and also the dreaded facing my fears. And there were tons of quotes online to motivate and inspire. The only way to overcome fear is to face it. Growth happens outside your comfort zone. Feel the fear and do it anyway. So I became determined to do whatever it took to beat my anxiety. And so I forced myself to do it, which was incredibly difficult, scary, and overwhelming. I couldn't sleep days in advance. And while I did all sorts of things to face my fears, like public speaking, high-fiving strangers, approaching women, purposely getting myself rejected, and even purposely embarrassing myself by wearing bright red lipstick and smearing red lipstick around my eyes, starting conversations with people while looking like a freak. Nothing worked. Yes, I did get the confidence that I was promised I would get. However, the confidence that I felt after the exposures didn't last. Within a few days, I was back to blushing and feeling anxious. So I was now terrified that I'd have to live with social anxiety for the rest of my life. Now, it was at this time that I discovered EFT. It stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, and it's a gentle tapping technique that's very effective for releasing stuck negative emotions, healing trauma, and shifting negative beliefs. When I first saw it demonstrated, I thought it had to be a scam, as it sounded way too good to be true. But as it turns out, it's a scientifically proven to be effective method. At first, though, it didn't work when I tried it on my own. But desperation and hope kept me going. I kept studying, and finally I joined an EFT workshop after months of trying. Here the workshop leader asked me if I had a girlfriend, which caused me to blush. And as I blushed, he instructed me to do the tapping. And then as I tapped, I felt the shame and heat melt away fast. It was like someone opened a drain and it all flowed out. And within a minute or two, I felt totally calm. I could now talk about my non-existing dating life without any shame whatsoever, which was incredible. In just a few minutes of tapping, I felt better than I had in the 5 years of trying other things, and it changed my life. Now, not because these few minutes of tapping solved my social anxiety or blushing, not at all, but because I now had finally found something that worked. It gave me a tool to start chipping away at the layers of my social anxiety. Now, you can actually completely overcome social anxiety by combining the best of psychology with EFT tapping. But I didn't know that for a fact yet. At the time, I just hoped for that to be true. So I made it my mission to overcome my social anxiety completely, and by 2009, I had made so much progress that I decided to make it my profession. Now, I've since been coaching clients to social confidence, and I continued my own journey of healing and transformation. Now, it was a long journey to overcoming my social anxiety, but I got help from brilliant therapists, and I continued studying the best that psychology has to offer, and I combined it with tapping, and through that, I managed to overcome my social anxiety completely. And for many years, I now simply feel calm, relaxed, and at ease in social situations. And I'm not unique in this. Many clients and members of our Social Confidence Club overcame their social anxiety as well. There are about 20 plus video interviews with former clients and club members on my YouTube channel, and they passionately share how the right psychology and EFT tapping helped them overcome their social anxiety. Now, you're probably wondering, can I overcome my social anxiety as well, and how to do that? Well, the answer is yes. And to discover how, let's talk about what happens in your brain when you feel anxious. Can you think of a recent time that you felt anxious? What happened? What did you see? What did you hear? How did you feel? There's something that triggered the anxiety response, even if you're not consciously aware of what it was. You see, anxiety gets triggered whenever your brain perceives a threat. What are these threats? Being judged, getting rejected, embarrassing yourself, someone confronting you, not being liked, getting criticized, becoming red while being the center of attention and people seeing it and laughing at you, etc. It's whatever you're afraid of happening and try to avoid happening. Because our brain perceives these threats, it activates the alarm, the fight, flight, freeze response. This is our millions of years old biological response to danger. Whenever it gets activated, your body floods with stress chemicals like adrenaline, your heart rate increases, blood moves away from your head and digestive system into your arms and legs, your pupils dilate and you hyper-focus on the threat, you might sweat or get hot, your mind blanks. And with all this, your whole system is optimally prepared to fight the danger, run from it if it's unlikely that you'll win the fight, or freeze as a last desperate resort if you can't outfight or outrun the danger. Now, obviously, there's no real-life danger in social situations, but the brain can respond to the threat of rejection in the same way as it responds to a wild bear charging at you. And so anxiety in social situations is at its core the activation of the fight, flight, freeze response. And do you remember what triggers the fight, flight, freeze? Right, the perception of threat. Now, what would happen when there is no perception of threat? Well, obviously, the fight, flight, freeze won't get activated, and there will be no social anxiety. No perception of threat equals no fight, flight, freeze equals no social anxiety. Therefore, we can conclude that the real problem isn't the anxiety. It just seems to be the real problem. But it's actually just a symptom of fight, flight, freeze activation. The real problem is the perception of threat. Think of someone socially confident. Okay, someone who's confident in situations that you're anxious in. Perhaps at work or at school. Pause the video if you need to. Now, why is that person confident? His brain doesn't see any potential danger, and therefore this person feels safe to be himself. Now, the great news is that you can overcome this perception of threat with the right approach, combining essential psychological concepts with EFT tapping. But first, we need to better understand what makes up this perception of threat. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine two guys, Seb and John. Seb deep down believes he's not good enough, that he's not okay the way that he is. He thinks people don't like him. He feels he has to impress others and get their approval, or else he'll be rejected. He's terrified of messing up socially because he's sure it'll lead to rejection. John, on the other hand, believes he's okay just the way that he is. He assumes people generally like him. Approval is nice, but he doesn't need it to feel good about himself. He's comfortable messing up socially and even finds it amusing. And he expects people will accept him. Which one of the two do you think will experience social anxiety? Exactly, Seb. So it's your beliefs that make up the perception of threat. Your belief system is causing you to perceive social threat, which activates the fight, flight, freeze response, leading to social anxiety. And if Seb wants to feel as confident and at ease as John, he needs to shift his beliefs. Now, easier said than done because beliefs are not the same as thoughts. They might seem similar, but beliefs are much more deeply ingrained. A belief is just like a thought, but the difference is that there's emotions connected to the thought, often linked to painful experiences. For example, a belief like, I'm not good enough, comes with emotional evidence from painful memories. You've gathered a lot of proof that indeed you're not good enough, and so it really feels true. Our subconscious mind collects these painful memories as emotional evidence to protect us from future harm and to alert us to similar dangers. Each new painful experience reinforces the belief even more. Now, a thought is easily changed by seeing it from a different perspective. But a belief is harder to change because it's emotionally rooted, often in painful experiences. Think of beliefs like roots of a tree. They anchor your social anxiety in place and cause the anxious thoughts and feelings that you have in social situations. Let's look at how Seb's belief system developed as an example. He experienced ongoing disapproval, criticism, and rejection from his mom and stepdad when he was little, making him feel ashamed, insecure, angry, and afraid. This childhood trauma led Seb's subconscious to form the deep-rooted belief, there's something wrong with me. I'm not okay the way that I am. Later, when his teacher made fun of him and his classmates laughed, that belief was reinforced. Further, because it seemed to him that everyone turned on him and he felt humiliated, embarrassed, and ashamed, Seb formed another belief. People don't like me. After more rejections, Seb became very sensitive to any sign of rejection. And he started expecting that he would get rejected all the time. Additionally, through years of observation of what's cool and what's not cool, Seb learned how he should act to get approval, to get people to like him. And he developed perfectionistic beliefs like, I should be confident at all times. Everyone must think I'm cool. I can never look bad socially. And slowly but surely, his social anxiety producing belief system was formed. Now, can you see how traumatic experiences, the emotions they create, and the beliefs learned from them all contribute to the perception of threat? This is why just challenging your thoughts alone isn't enough to change deep-rooted beliefs. You can't out-logic all that emotional evidence. Overcoming social anxiety requires healing the emotional wounds and releasing the deep-rooted beliefs that stem from them. So, if challenging thoughts alone isn't enough to change deep-rooted beliefs, what's the solution? How do we release the emotional evidence and shift these beliefs for good? Well, that's where the power of EFT tapping comes in. EFT, or Emotional Freedom Techniques, is a scientifically proven method that uses simple tapping on certain points on your body while you focus on uncomfortable feelings and negative beliefs. The tapping helps process stuck feelings from past experiences and releases the limiting beliefs that make your brain perceive social situations as threatening. Now, to fully overcome social anxiety, just tapping alone isn't enough. You also need to understand some simple psychological ideas that help you feel safe and confident around others. Now, the good news is that these ideas are easy to learn and apply, and once you combine them with tapping, you'll notice profound and lasting changes in your anxiety. By combining the best of psychology with EFT tapping, you have a holistic approach that tackles both the thinking and the feeling side of social anxiety, and this allows you to overcome it completely. I believe this is where most traditional approaches fall short. They focus primarily on logic and behavior. Techniques like changing your negative thoughts can be helpful for some, but for many people, they don't lead to lasting changes. And facing your fears directly can be terrifying and difficult to sustain. And research suggests that for many people, these traditional methods like changing thoughts or facing fears provide only temporary relief, as they don't address the deeper emotional and psychological roots of social anxiety. Most psychological approaches miss a crucial element, a way to release the emotions effectively. Now, this is critical because social anxiety is fundamentally an emotional issue. You can't outthink social anxiety. You have to release the stuck emotions and trauma that trigger it. And this is where tapping really shines. From the safety and comfort of your own home, you tune into the beliefs, the memories, and the uncomfortable emotions, and you start to release them. Tapping often helps you let go of stuck emotions fast, and you feel the changes happening in the moment while you're tapping. Sometimes within minutes you can go from anxious to calm. And it's also not always like that. With more deeply ingrained emotions or patterns, it often takes more tapping over a period of time. But it's easy to do, and the best news is that when you properly shift the perception of threat, you experience lasting anxiety relief. By combining key psychological concepts with EFT tapping, you unlock a level of change that simply wasn't possible before. And with time and practice, you can fully overcome your social anxiety. Now, if this sounds too good to be true, I get it. But take a look at the description box for links to scientific studies that back up EFT's effectiveness, or watch the various testimonial interviews on my channel. EFT is the real deal. It's not a magic pill, but when you learn the skill and you apply it to your triggers, you can completely overcome your social anxiety. Now, as a simplified example, Seb used tapping to heal the painful rejections from his mom, the humiliation from his teacher, and other experiences that caused him to form these beliefs. This changed his perception of social threat, and with that, his social anxiety disappeared. Now, in reality, this isn't something that happens overnight. When you've been suffering from social anxiety for years, often for decades or as long as you can remember, there's going to be quite some tapping that needs to be done, and some essential psychological concepts to be learned. And it will be a progressive decreasing of social anxiety. But here's the key takeaway. It's not hard. And each time you tap effectively for social anxiety, you experience relief. Imagine having a reliable technique to release social anxiety whenever it arises. And with each tapping session, you're chipping away at the layers of social anxiety, slowly but surely shrinking the problem. This approach is gentle as it allows you to work on your anxiety from the comfort of your own home. And it's highly effective because it targets the deeper emotional layers, which leads to lasting change. By combining powerful psychological principles with EFT tapping, you can achieve complete freedom from social anxiety, feeling calm, confident, and at ease in social situations. Now, when you're ready to start releasing your social anxiety, the best way to begin is to get my powerful free mini course called The 7 Secrets to Social Confidence. Here I've compiled the most profound insights from over 6,000 hours of solely coaching social anxiety disorder sufferers, and I present it to you in a very easily digestible way. It includes guided EFT tapping so you can experience the relief that tapping brings, and it lays the foundation to overcome your social anxiety completely. Go grab it at bit.ly/social confidence now or check the description box. Now, in upcoming videos, I'll guide you through an experience of tapping so you get a taste of what's possible. And I'll also be hosting YouTube Lives where I'll demonstrate coaching live with a social anxiety disorder sufferer, and I'll be applying the best of psychology with EFT tapping, and so you can follow along and see for yourself what happens. Now, until then, check out these inspiring interviews with people who overcame their social anxiety.